Greetings and welcome to this segment of Superintendent's Corner. My name is Richard Sapphire, Superintendent of Schools, and this show is an opportunity to talk about the successes, the challenges, and the issues facing the district. Tonight, we have our Assistant Superintendent, Mr. Greg Bach. Welcome, and thank you for coming on the show. We have recently been working on our district improvement plan, and we have some changes this year because we have an infusion of information that's coming in from outside the district, which is being integrated with a lot of the work that we're doing inside the district. And in particular, I'm talking about your involvement with an agency called the Essex County Learning Collaborative. Kind of a new approach. I wonder if you could just talk about what the ECLC, the Essex County Learning Collaborative, is.
Sure. There are a number of acronyms I'm going to use to talk about this, and one of them, the ECLC, is actually the Essex County Learning Community. It is facilitated by the Center for Collaborative Education. So the ECLC is something that I've wanted to do for a long time. It represents something that in the last 20-something years in Gloucester, in the back of my mind, I've always wondered what it would take and why we don't collaborate more with other districts to do, to put on professional development, to research and explore and make common plans on the kinds of things that we all face. Part of it is logistics, geography, sometimes it's money, but it takes a lot of work to get districts together. So the ECLC, the learning community, is something that was created out of a grant fund from the Tower Foundation and facilitated by the Center for Collaborative Education. And that turns out to be one of the key pieces, is an independent professional organization whose primary role and their expertise is in bringing people together. So we have a number of districts in our learning community. There's Gloucester, and we have nearby communities of Danvers, Beverly, Swampscott, Rockport, and surprisingly we haven't done a lot of work with Rockport, even though they're right next door. And then the farthest away is Haverhill. And those communities were all brought together last May and June with lead teams from each district, 6 or 7 per, and those involve superintendents, assistant superintendents, special education directors, and teachers and principals. And those teams spent 2 days identifying 3 common areas that we all face.
Right. I wanted to just interject that the whole basis for them doing this is the presumption that different districts, they may have outward differences, but at the core, public education, society in general has similar concerns, and we're looking for ways to address those major concerns, which we'll talk about.
We found out in about the first hour of all of these districts being in the same room that it was not hard to come up with 3 because they came right to the top of everyone's charts. And so despite a wide range of demographics in these districts, we had 3 common ones immediately.
Right. So. Well, you were beginning to talk a little bit more about the process. You spoke about how it began. A little bit more about the meetings and what's been involved, please.
Yep. So we spent last year from May until December doing a planning stage. And that was phase 1. And in the planning phase, we combined district representative meetings. We also had a really nice structure where we had a teacher subcommittees that met to research each of the 3 areas that the leadership had identified. So the teachers did research, but they also had presenters, nationwide experts were provided by this grant to come in and work directly with them. We had a 2-day summer institute that all members, teachers and administrators went to, so that there was learning that was grounding the plan creation process. And then we spent the fall together creating district plans, and we presented those all in December at a get-together of all of the districts. Now we're in phase 2, where we take those plans and we implement. over the next 2 to 3 years. And the great thing about Phase 2 is that Tower Foundation and the Center for Collaborative Education recognized that not only did we have common goals, but we had a number of common, very specific needs. And so they pooled the resources together, and we have, for example, I can talk about it in a minute, an MTSS seminar that is funded at the sort of the center of all of this.
Right, a multi-tiered system of supports and the like. You had said at the very outset that it's something, working with other districts, that you have wanted to do. To date, kind of two questions. What's your reaction to the interaction that's taken place between different districts in this process?
It's been so refreshing and so rewarding that despite the many meetings involved with the ECLC structure, the district leads, so in most cases just the assistant superintendent and the special education director, have created an additional team that meets outside of these other hours. And that's where it's very informal. And we talk about issues that we're facing, professional development that's upcoming. So for 6 districts to be in the same room, simply looking at calendars and looking at when we might be able to offer something jointly. So out of one meeting last month, we recognized that 3 of the 6 districts had not only common professional development needs, but we all wanted the same presenter. And so we are going to be pooling our resources to engage that presenter, and then we'll travel and we'll rotate it around. And that is provides us an economy of scale. We can attract a nationally known expert in an area if it's not just one district incurring the cost. We also are working on job-alike teams as well. So this work has also, interestingly, has spurred other areas of collaboration among districts. So we have twos and trios working together. So it's a good move, and we needed to do it.
Yeah, great. Before we get into some of the specifics, I just wanted to ask a little bit about the dynamics between the working of the large group and what you described as the in-house group of folks, and particularly to what extent are you seeing an exchange and integration of ideas from different districts and it being at least considered, conceptualized here in our district?
Well, one of the things that we do after every community meeting of all the districts, we try to schedule an in-district meeting within the following week.
And those are the same group of people that attend?
It's the same group, or if there are 2 subgroups that meet, the groups come together, and we try to do it every time after they've been away. So we just had a meeting on Monday, for example, where and this is something we also don't get to do a lot in education or in a lot of jobs. We don't get a chance to reflect and apply after learning something. Right. So we are coming together in district to talk about what we learned, what we would apply, what kind of resources we need, and who did we meet while we were working with other districts who had similar things going on, and how might we take advantage of that.
Yeah, the Monday meeting is not the one that you kicked my group out of, I don't think.
It might be, yeah.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so as I mentioned at the outset, this is a strong influence and a new one on our district improvement plan. Our district improvement plan is an ongoing strategic plan, a lot of continuity with the years past, and also the introduction of new ideas as we seek to do what is best on behalf of the students. So there are, as you mentioned, there are 3 central concepts associated with the work that you've been doing with the ECLC. The first of these major themes are to increase student engagement through strategies that promote their motivation, competence, getting kids, in a word, getting them excited to learn. And I know that we're looking at this particular issue of increasing student engagement at the district level, high school, middle school, and at the elementary as well. So take your pick or all 3. Let's talk a little bit about how are we looking or thinking about promoting student engagement, motivation, etc.
It's a huge topic, and it could have filled numerous plans, but we decided to focus in two specific areas. Not that we're not interested in this at the high school or in every subject area, but we knew we should take on things that we already had structures or a vested interest in. So for example, at the middle school, as part of the innovation school plan developed a number of years ago, possibly five, 6 years
in
ago.
its sixth year.
6 years. Project-based learning is essential component of the innovation school. And there are incredible projects that take place in the middle school. But what we recognized is that as professional development goes through its intense period and then drops off, which is natural, we have new teachers who come into a building as others retire. So we have some teachers who were never part of initial training. We have other initiatives that sometimes shove or compete for time, and we don't want to lose sight of something that's a core. So part of the ECLC outcome, one of the outcomes, is to revitalize or refocus and take our project-based learning to another level. And a couple quick ways we'll do that.
First, before you do that, can you, I heard you say that we need to indoctrinate our new teachers and we need to sustain our initiative, but and before you talk about the illustrations, why is project-based learning important?
Well, I can use myself as an example. I was not the most avid math student in school. I am now. I love math, but at the time, the kind of education that I had didn't get me very motivated to do math, because I was the kind of student who always wanted to know why and what is this going to do for me. And those are two key motivators for students. So we have to understand why something works, and to me it had to be, how does it apply to the real world? So if I had engaged in a more extensive project with my peers, because we also know that students enjoy and learn from each other from working together. They like to have autonomy, they like to be able to pick things, they like to create on their own.
Right.
So
develop different roles for one another within a team approach.
I may be strong at one thing and I may have a partner who's strong at another thing. If you're always sitting in a row and always receiving information directly from the teacher, your opportunities to do that are limited. But if I can take a real world application, building a boat, for example, where I may have to use some very complex compound curves, I may need to go in deep into a design process, that gives me a reason to learn the kinds of the geometry and the fractions and all the things I'm going to need, the measurement I'm going to need. And if I'm nuts about boats and want to build one, and I can employ my math in it, it's a real win.
Yeah, there's a relevance and an authenticity with project-based learning.
So a couple ways that we will refocus our efforts on project-based learning. Through the ECLC process, we discovered that Beverly had engaged with one of the premier project-based learning training organizations in the last year or two, and that they had done a train-the-trainer kind of process. So they now have in their district several teachers who went through a very, very intensive program to become trainers. And they're right next door. They don't have to fly from Washington State. And we will be able to have our teachers not only see what they're doing, but maybe employ them to come here.
Terrific.
We'll also be partnering with a mentor a school that is a more advanced school, has been at it longer, and establish a partnership with visits back and forth.
Great. Also at the elementary level, we've been looking at student engagement in part through a lot of the readings and the research that has been written about it, the topic over the last couple of years. Eric Jensen and his writings about living with working with students in poverty, and I know that Melissa Orkin is another name. Can you talk a little bit about how we're at least thinking about beginning to frame how we can further engage our students at the elementary level?
Yeah. So this again is a very, very long topic. So I can give one example that I think is very relevant. We often think in terms of reward as something that motivates students. The gold star on the paper, the 100 score, or even getting an extra prize to do something, or being given something to motivate somebody to do homework, for example, or I will give you $10. I remember this. $10 for every A was what my grandparents did.
Really?
Yeah.
I got shortchanged. They offered me $2.
There are repeated studies, though, that show that those kinds of motivators are not as powerful as intrinsic motivation. When a student sets a goal and achieves that goal that they have set, a monetary reward or any other reward is not nearly as powerful as the intrinsic reward. So there are specific strategies that work for different kinds of students that will help them develop their own sense of autonomy. I'm taking control of my learning. I'm setting this goal, and when I reach it, it's going to feel so much better than somebody giving me a gold star. There are research-based strategies that are shown to work with different populations. ELL students, low-income families may be more students may be more motivated by certain strategies. Those who've experienced trauma may be motivated by certain things. Those who come from a very different culture than the teacher may be used to. These are all things that you need to be aware of and employ certain kinds of strategies. So we'll be identifying the best, most effective strategies that are already documented and out there in research, and training our teachers to employ those strategies.
Yeah, great. And as a leadership team, we started talking a little bit about resilience, and one of our principals talked about resilience and its importance and its definition being that in spite of the obstacles, a student has the wherewithal and the motivation to continue to work towards a particular goal. So included in what you're describing is that they may flop a couple of times, and they need to see that not as failure, but as steps toward getting to the outcome that they're
and that's
seeking.
part of our whole growth mindset work that we've done over the years too.
Great. Along with student engagement, the second major issue that's coming out of the work that you've been doing with the districts and with our team within is a district-wide tiered system of supports, and you referred to MTSS before as well. So we're looking to see to what extent we can provide at different levels the remediation that children need in order to get them up to speed with respect to the learning, particularly in relation to the general population and the like. So I know that one of the things that we want to do is to be able to define and implement a tiered system of support K through 8. Can you talk a little bit about what our thoughts are, or what direction we might be going in that regard?
Yeah. The tiered system of support, Massachusetts, it's called the MTSS, a Massachusetts tiered system of support. You might call it multiple tiered systems of support. But so the MTSS for Massachusetts really is an umbrella that describes all of the structures, strategies, teaching practices, the curriculum, all involved in providing support for all students that is identified. Every student is going to get this. There may be some students, it might be 5 or 10%, who need more. They may need repetition. They may need something slightly different. So somebody used the analogy of dental work.
Okay.
We all should be going to the dentist twice a year to have a cleaning and a checkup. That's all.
Right.
Some of us may need to go back to have a cavity filled, so that's the sum. So that's a more intensive process. And some, when we get a little bit older, may need to have more extensive work, so that would be the smaller part of the pyramid. So everybody gets this, but some may need more intensive or different. So we need to make sure that that is crystal clear across the district. We can't just assume that this is going to happen for a student in need. So you have to create a system of data to identify the students who need more, and then a very structured plan for who provides those extra supports and when they provide those extra supports. Interestingly, this is the need that took about 3 minutes when all of the districts got together. And this goes, I was in a meeting with a district that is in a very different demographic than ours, and they feel that their students, for the most part, are performing extremely well on MCAS, and that they have all the funding, but they are seeing the need, still seeing a percentage that is not getting what they need, and a percentage that still needs more. So they are looking into a tiered system of supports, just as our district and all of Haverhill, every district in the group recognizes that it needs to be systematic, it needs to be clear, documented, and well supported. Right. So since we all agreed immediately last May, all districts have been working with 2 nationally renowned experts in the field, George Bach and Judy Elliott. They've written multiple books and articles on the topic. They've traveled around the country. They're very difficult to get hold of, and we would not, certainly as a single district, we would not have been able to have them come. But we now have a 10-member team that just went to day 1 of a full-day training with both of them, working with teams of 10 from each district. And we will have a 3 full-day training. And then George Bach, who is going to be coming and spending coaching time in our district.
Wow,
so this is one of those opportunities we never would have been able to do on our own. So we'll be getting, and we have embedded coaching support from CCE. So in order to establish a really good, solid, tiered system of supports to help all students achieve, we're going to get some very high-level help.
Right. And this is not to suggest that we don't have interventions in place, and we certainly do for literacy. We certainly need more for math. And one of the areas that we don't have something systematic, which is probably true for many, many school districts, is in the area of social emotional learning and such.
Yeah.
So, and you had mentioned just the other day that conducting an audit, having experts come in and looking to see how we can maximize the efficiency of the resources that we have, that may help us to be more effective, more efficient, more systematic. And as we consider budgets and future budgets and the like, the extent to which we will need to add resources to meet the needs of all students, we'll have to take that into consideration, as we always do.
I just want to point out, you mentioned something very important. Over the last 5 or 6 years, particularly at the elementary school, we, in our partnership with Bay State Reading Institute, now Momenta, we, with their help, implemented many of the things that are present in a tiered system of supports, particularly around academics and especially around literacy. The 5-year trend in our elementary schools is fantastic. We have schools, all 5 schools are performing, the graph looks like this. It just goes up and up over the last 5 years. So we know that we were able to do this work in one subject area at our elementary schools, and we had great response. The challenge is to do that with every aspect of our instruction across every grade level, and that's where we're looking at a multi-year project. But I just want to point out our elementary schools are really doing extremely well, and we want to bring some of that same kind of systematic approach to all of our schools.
Yeah, and the word that comes to mind for me as well is vitality. We've got about 3 minutes left, 3.5 minutes. The third major aspect has to do with the extent to which the district can become increasingly sensitive to different cultures and to equity-minded teaching. I know that this is an area that we're really trying to still grapple and understand, but how do we think about becoming more culturally responsive with the presumption that the more students know that they're understood and included and incorporated, the greater the potential that they're going to feel engaged as well, which you spoke about with the first major theme. So what are your thoughts on how do we become more culturally responsible? What sort of introspection, self-reflection is necessary?
There's a lot we can do. We can evaluate our curricula, we can evaluate everything that we have in print, but it can be much simpler than that. And you mentioned the key word. It's about engaging all students. And if, as the demographics in our schools have shifted somewhat, and if we have a more diverse group of students, and a teacher's goal and their desire is to maximize their engagement, we have to understand a bit about what a student's experience may have been like before they entered that classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And the experience of a student who has grown up in Lanesville is going to be very different from a student who has just moved in from another part of the United States or another country. And being aware of that doesn't mean you have to shift major things, but if in the math example I came up with a real world challenge for a group
Mm-hmm.
who has never even seen snow before, I wouldn't want to pick a challenge opportunity that involved building an igloo or something like
Right.
that. It might take very little work to identify relevant, compelling connections to the culture and the experiences that student already has, so that I can make those
Right,
connections.
right. As well as our understanding that and it's not a bad thing, but we bring our own inclinations and our own biases to the way we think, and we need to better understand that as well.
Right.
Yeah. I think we have to leave it there. I thank you so very, very much for getting involved. I know this is a push that you've been interested in doing for years. It's going to be, I think, a very seismic contribution to the district, as is your effort. So thank you so very, very much.
Thank
and
you.
for this segment of Superintendent's Corner, I say thank you and good night.